Hey guys, and welcome to Aussie Reviews. Well, this is the second episode of my Q&A, where you guys who support me on Patreon get to fire a heap of questions at me, and hopefully I can answer them in this monthly episode. So let's jump straight into this month's questions. Now, first question I've got here is from Chris Farr. Now, Chris asks, do you use bore guides and cleaning rod stops, and how often should you clean the bore of a 22 LR rifle? Now, interesting question, mate. I used to have a couple of bore guides, and the idea behind it is so when you're pushing a cleaning rod through, it's not actually damaging the face of the chamber or anything like that. Now, obviously, it's not going to happen if you just do that once or twice, you knock it. But over repetitive cleaning sessions, then, it can cause dramas. I'm of the other side of it. I even though I do have them, I just take care when I'm pushing that rod through. So in other words, I line it up with the bore, push it into the actual bore, and then straight through from there. I don't just roughly put it through, so I'm not knocking anything about in the rifle. And I've done this for several years with rifles, and look, I've had no real problems with them. They still shoot very accurately. I think it's about just taking care with the rifle. To answer your last question here, mate, on how often you should clean a 22 rifle, you'll hear a lot of people say that, look, they shoot better when their 22 is dirty. Yes, that's true, but a lot of people think, well, you never have to clean a 22, which couldn't be further from the truth. Now, if you disagree with that, all I say to you is, okay, fire 500 rounds through your 22 and then just leave it in the safe there for a couple of months and have a look what all that carbon and build-up does to your chamber, your action, your bolt and everything else. It's not pretty. So every time I use my 22, different if I was just going out and I fired like 10 shots through it, I'd probably just leave it. But if you're firing a couple of packs of ammo through it, I'll clean it every single time. Now, what I'll do is I'll clean the chamber, the bolt, and the mag well, all that sort of thing, where you'll find all that dirt and grit from the 22. I'll make sure that is all completely clean as a whistle. With the actual bore, okay, what I'll do is I'll just spray some G96 down it, let it run down the barrel, get just a single clean patch and a guide rod, push it through, and simple as that. It'll just push all the carbon and everything out the end, without going to the degree of stripping everything back, okay, like an aggressive solvent would. So in other words, what I'm doing is I'm still leaving a certain amount of deposit in that actual bore, that barrel, but I'm not pushing everything out, okay, and taking it back to step A. And if you saw the previous video I did on choosing the correct 22 ammunition, I spoke about how the wax works on a lot of those 22 LR rounds, when it lubricates the actual bore and the rifling, okay, and it allows for more efficient speeds or consistent speeds, which will give you better accuracy. So that's the idea behind it, is don't take it all the way back, but still give it a good enough clean that it's clean, if that makes sense. Now, Edward says here, I've been wanting to get an old Lee Enfield SMLE and wondering your thoughts on them. Mate, well, I can still remember the first time I fired one of them as just a kid, and I tell you what, my shoulder felt it because it was the old brass butt on it, and most people, I think, of my era will have a very similar story to that of their dad or their granddad or uncle or something like that taking them out and getting them behind a 303 for the first time. Very powerful cartridge in the sense of a lot of punch with the 303. A lot of people say, well, what's the point of a 303? You should just get a 308. But it depends on what you want to do. So if you want to have it for more historical value, why not? Very good cartridge. The only thing is you're going to be paying a lot more for the ammunition than what you will a 308, and there's not as much variety as what you have with the 308. But you may want to get into reloading for it as well. But as for the quality of them, look, made in the early 1900s and they're still going today, so that should be testament to the quality that go into those rifles. Jason Thompson asks here, what are your thoughts on comparing metal 1911s to polymer striker-fired pistols? Well, mate, it's a funny thing with handguns, isn't it? You usually get people who are on one side of the fence or the other when it comes to the 1911 versus striker-fired handguns. Now, I find with both there's advantages. For example, like the 1911 is just so awesome in the sense of you can just manipulate it, customize it, to your liking. There's so much stuff you can do to it, which makes it a lot of fun. Whereas the striker-fired pistols, even though you usually can't do all that, I mean, you've got a firearm that's pretty robust. It's not going to rust, being polymer. It's a lot easier to maintain in the sense of, for example, if you go out to the range and using a 1911, on the rear of the 1911 you've got the grip safety. They're metal, so once you've been out the range, if you don't clean that, next time you go and use that handgun, you've got rust on all the outside of it. So, look, I can see the fors and against with both, but me personally, I just love a 1911. I love, changing out the sights, put in some high vis sights. You can put in a polished sear or disconnector and lighten up the trigger, all that sort of stuff. It's just so configurable, and that would probably be my preference over some of the striker-fired stuff. Now, Jesse Webster says, what scope do you recommend for a Ruger Precision in 308 for between $400 to $500? Well, Jesse, a lot of people know that I don't really favour Chinese or Filipino-made scopes. Look, there's a lot of them out there that certainly will work and probably will never give you any trouble. However, for me, I just like something a little bit higher quality that I can just put a bit more confidence in. So my benchmark there is something made in Japan. Now you can find some really good scopes made in Japan. I mean, look, there's countless ones. A lot of the ones that you would think were made in the Philippines and that, like the high-end Vortexes, I mean, they're made in Japan, but their lower-end ones are made in the Philippines and China. So, you've really got to be aware of what model you're looking at so you can determine where it's made. But for me, honestly, on the Ruger Precision, I'd probably put an American-made scope, so I'd go for one of the American-made Redfields. Or really, if it was me personally, I'd be just simply putting a VX3i scope on it from Leupold. That way you've got something decent quality on there. It's not going to let you down, and it's just a good benchmark without having to fork out all the dollars for like a higher end Trijicon, Schmidt & Bender, Carl's, Swarovski, Night Force, all that sort of stuff. If you had the money, I'd certainly be saying, look, put a really good Schmidt & Bender on it, or something like that, or even the real high-end, long-range target optics from Trijicon or Leupold. But you don't. You've got to stick to that budget. So that would be my advice. Go and have a look at the range of the VX3i from Leupold, and that's what I'd put on there. Jeremy Dale says, can you give a quick rundown on import laws and restrictions? What's the down and dirty with the NFA? Well, mate, to answer your first one, it's probably a complete separate review because it'll go on for quite some time. But in a nutshell, what you have to be aware of is what requires an import permit here in Australia. Okay, now there's some things that won't require an import permit. So, for example, if you're importing some grips for your 1911, right? That's not going to require a permit. Or if you're importing some, new open sights for your 1911 or your, whatever rifle it is that you've got replaceable sights with, no problem. That can just come straight in because they're classed as small parts. Where it gets a little bit technical is once you start bringing in, for example, like a trigger assembly. Now, if it's a trigger assembly, it doesn't matter whether it's incomplete or complete, it will require an import permit. However, if you're just bringing in like a sear or a disconnector or the actual trigger blade itself or something like that, it doesn't require a permit. So you've got to be very careful, and the best way to safeguard yourself is you just flick customs an email with the link of what you're buying or what you'd like to buy. Say, hey, this is what I want to bring in. Do I require a permit? And they'll soon tell you whether you do or you don't. Most permits are issued by your state or territory police department with what's called a B709. Once you have that, you simply have to go out to customs, show your license, and then they'll give you your goods and hand it over. The only time that you'll have to go through the Attorney General's department is when you're going usually for more restricted stuff. So some of your Cat C stuff for feral pest controllers. Cat C for primary production is just at state level with a B709. Category D, that'll definitely go through Attorney Generals. So there's a few different things there. What you also got to be aware of is there any export restrictions on where you're buying the product from? So does it require any permits? So that can be very tricky as well. Like for example, if you're buying like shotgun parts, for example, okay, from the US, a lot of the time shotgun parts aren't regulated from the US because they're classed as sporting goods. Okay, however, if you then go and buy something else for a rifle, then it will be restricted and you'll be required to have different export permits depending on what the actual part is. So it can be very difficult, but like I said, mate, it'll probably be more of a video that I should do separately. So if people want me to do one, comment below, thumbs up the video, and I'll look at doing that for you. To answer your last question, what's the down and dirty with the NFA? Wow, I tell you what, it's really sort of starting to heat up here in Queensland. Basically, we've got Labor on one side wanting to bring in the NFA. It was their police minister that signed off on it. We now have a new police minister. This is our third Labor police minister in just one single term. I don't know what's going on there, but anyhow, that's the story. So where are we sitting at? At the moment, Labor don't seem to want to push it through prior to this next election because they know that there's enough support from the LNP, from the Katter Party and from One Nation Party here at state level to withdraw it. Okay, now it's a regulation change, so from my understanding I've been told that it doesn't have to be voted on in Parliament, so Labor can just simply push it through, but then what can happen is the politicians who are against that can then withdraw it. Okay, so my question there is, well, what if that happens? What if they do withdraw it and Queensland folds for the NFA? Does that then have a domino effect for every other state? If it does, wow, I mean, can you imagine the results there? So what my personal thoughts on it are, they'll wait till the next election to see if they've got the numbers to push it through, then they'll push it through. However, I can't see that happening. The support that we have here in Queensland for LNP, One Nation especially, they have a massive following here. Then in North Queensland, there is a big following for the Katter Party as well. I just can't see them pushing it through, to be quite honest. I really can't. Even worst case scenario, if they did push it through, once the next election is here, honestly, I believe that One Nation, Katter Party and the LNP will just simply withdraw it. So personally, I'd like to see the states make their own laws about what they will and won't do, not be told by the federal government what they will and won't do. Brent Booking asks here, he says his wife has dropped her Lithgow LA 101. No! Anyhow, look, it's something that can happen to all of us, but now the barrel is sitting a little bit offset. Now, Brent and I have been discussing this privately. However, I thought I'd put it on this episode of Q&A because there's other people that may want to know the answer. So basically, look, if that happens, so say for example you've got a firearm, it's leaning up against your car, you know, you're out shooting, whatever, and it falls over and it hits a rock or something, you know, you've got a little bit of a dint in the stock, but then you notice like the channel where the stock is and the barrel sits and it might be a little bit offset and not even both sides like it used to be. Look, it can be a very easy fix, in which case it was here for Brent. Now, all that had to be done was just simply the stock with the main takedown screw just had to be loosened a bit and then just fitted again. So in other words, all he did was just loosen the stock off, tighten it back into the actual action or the barreled action, and it was sitting a lot more center. So if it isn't after that and there's a problem like with accuracy and so forth, get it to a gunsmith. You may need a new stock or there may be something else there. Now, Aaron Hewitt, I hope I pronounced the surname correctly there, Aaron, says, any chance of doing any old military surplus rifle reviews such as the 303 or the 6.5 by 55? Mate, yeah, good question. I get a good handful of people wanting those reviews, so definitely something that I'm going to be looking at. I just haven't had the opportunity yet because I've had so much new product coming in and I've been trying to just cover a heap of it. So this is the problem. If more people support me with Patreon, you know, and there's some incentive there in the sense of you've got to realise that the reviews, you know, when I'm doing the reviews, I've still got to earn some sort of money because I'm then going away from doing my contract shooting or I'm not working on the farm and earning my income. So what I need to do is have a healthy balance. So in other words, if there's support from you guys there to do more reviews, okay, I'll definitely do them, okay, and I'll wind back the contract shooting or wind back the farming a little bit, or, you know, pay someone to come in and help me out with it so I can put more time and energy into the reviews. So yeah, that's where I'm at with that. Wes Turner says, any plans to do a PCP air rifle review? I haven't really done much, have I, with air rifles? I did the Walther like years ago, and I don't really know a heap about air rifles probably to the level of what people out there who are real fans of air rifles do. I mean, my experience with air rifles is just simply, using them on the farm. When I was a kid, that was pretty much it. I know now they've developed so much. You get semi-auto air rifles and stuff. You can even get them right up to like 357 caliber and everything. I mean, there's a lot out there. So look, not off the cards, but not something I'll do anytime soon. Now, Sean says here, do you think a better rifle makes a person a better shooter? For example, will the average shooter shoot better if they're shooting a Seiko compared to a Howe rifle? Now, interesting question there, Sean, because, it's the old saying of you get what you pay for, but then again, you can have things just pop up, like, for example, when I did the Ruger American review, using that OSA ammo, 3 shots at 100.1 of an inch. I mean, what more do you want? Now, how I address this is, okay, would I prefer that Ruger American over my Anschutz 1770 in 223? No, definitely not. The Anschutz is just pure class. So in other words, I feel that I can shoot better with that Anschutz than what I can do with that Ruger American, okay? And the reason I say it is the Anschutz is just consistent. So in other words, when it finds, like you'll be using whatever ammo through it, most ammos through that Anschutz just shoot brilliantly. Whereas some of the cheaper firearms I find, they'll only favour one ammo or maybe 2 ammos, and that was definitely evident with the Ruger American. The other ammos didn't perform, but when I went on to that 55 grain Game King from OSA, bang, that was the one it liked. Where with my Anschutz, I can put that through it, I can put the Hornady VMAX through it, and just shoot brilliantly. So my advice is, if you had the money, I would definitely go up to a higher end rifle, because there's more finishes that are done really nicely in those higher end rifles, and you've got very high quality in the parts and everything for it to be basically a rifle for longevity, okay? Not saying that a Ruger American's not going to last you or a Howe is not going to last you, but all I'm saying is it's a difference between getting, like, say, a new Holden Commodore or getting the new S-Class Mercedes. Like, it's just a complete different ride if you understand where I'm coming from. So best advice is you get a high quality rifle that you like, because I do personally believe in the long term they are a better investment, because you're not going to have to replace parts and stuff on them like you will with cheaper rifles. Nicholas Warmington says here, can every rifle take a bipod? Does it just replace the sling mount? Yeah, pretty much, Nick. Every rifle pretty much can, in the sense of if they've got a sling attachment there, or if, like for example the Ruger Precision or the Tikka T3X A1 TAC, they've got those AR4 ends now. So if you've got a Picatinny rail, or you've got a rail there with a sling attachment, you can put a traditional bipod on it. However, look at things like, for example, my Anschutz 1710 in 22. Like, it's got a sling attachment at the front there, but it's also got that German forend, so it's a curve at the front of the stock. So there's no way in hell I could actually put a bipod on it. Technically, yeah, you could fit it, but it just wouldn't be stable. So not all rifles can, but pretty much that's how they attach, either with a Picatinny rail underneath or a sling attachment. Now, F-Top says here, thoughts on Spiker versus Harris bipods. I've never owned a Spiker bipod, to be honest with you there, mate. Look, Harris, I swear by them. I've used them for many, many years. They've never let me down. In saying that, a lot of people nowadays talk about Atlas and how awesome they are, and yeah, you can configure them and move them and adjust them around a lot better than what you can with the Harris. But for me, I'm just happy with the Harris. Call me a bit of a no-frills guy in regards to bipods, but look, if you can afford it, go up to a Harris. Other than, like cheaper sort of bipods. I don't like cheap bipods, but if you really want to go right up, go up to an Atlas, and you've got that manoeuvrability with it. So you ask here too, F-Tops, thoughts on Vortex scopes. Look, probably get killed for saying this, but I don't really like Vortex scopes. They've never really impressed me. I don't understand why there's a lot of hype about them. I've used a handful of them now, and look, some are really nice. As I've said before, like, you've really got to be careful on which actual model of Vortex you buy, because their high-end models are made in Japan, very, very nice and clear from what I've seen. But then you've got your lower-end models, which are made in the Philippines and China. So, when you compare those to other brands that are made in the Philippines and China, they're all the same as far as I'm concerned. So, look, I really don't understand the hype about them. For me personally, I probably would never buy one and put one on my own rifle. That's just me. Okay, your final question here, F-Tops. A lot of my mates don't use solvent on their centerfire rifles. They leave the copper in there till it really builds up and then just remove the carbon. What's your thoughts on this? Look, I don't like leaving anything in centerfire rifles, so my cleaning routine is using that, I did the video on it, is to use that foam bore cleaner from Gunslick. Okay, put that in there, leave it there for 20 odd minutes. It'll turn blue when it reacts with the copper. Patch that out. Once I've patched that out clean, G96 straight down, put a patch through it. That's all I do. I do that every time I use my centerfire rifles, and look, I've had no problem with it. They shoot brilliantly time after time, and it's never let me down, that regime, so I'd probably recommend it to you. Daniel Torren says, out of all your firearms, what would be your personal favourite and why? I think a lot of people will answer this, so it'll be the Kid 1022 for sure. Just something about it, I don't know whether it just takes me back to like my childhood of using the Ruger 1022, but I just enjoy it, little 10-shot semi-auto. It's just a fantastic rifle. Now, John, okay, I'm having trouble saying your surname. Economidis, I think. Economidis, I hope that's how you say it. John, you're going to have to send me a message, mate, on how to pronounce your surname. I'm very sorry. You asked thoughts on reloading versus factory ammo. This is a really good question, because it's not like 20 years ago, 30 years ago even, like back then, like if you were getting sort of like an inch to 2 inch group with your favourite hunting rifle there at 100 using factory ammo, that was pretty good, that was acceptable. Nowadays, unless it shoots MOA, so under an inch there at 100, you're sort of like, what's wrong with this rifle? The factory ammunition has just come so far, and look, I would only see the advantage of reloading is if you were obviously getting into long range and you wanted to make sure that your actual loads were spot on identical. I could see an advantage there. Or if you're actually reloading to save money, like for example the 6.5 Creedmoor here in Australia, I mean, who can afford to be spending $3 a shot? So if you own that caliber, I'd definitely be reloading for it. So compared to factory ammunition, reloading has its advantages. However, for me, like, I don't reload anymore. I used to when I was younger, but now predominantly I use 308, I use 223, or I'm using rimfire, which obviously people know you can't reload. So for 223 and 308, I mean, the deals that you can get in bulk and get the ammo that just shoots brilliantly. Like for example, let's bring up the Ruger American Review again. 3 shots there with that OSA 55 grain Game King. 0.1 of an inch. Like, how are you going to beat that with reloads? I mean, you're just not going to do it. So for me, and that ammo is extremely cheap. It's probably one of the cheapest 223 ammos you can get. Why wouldn't you just buy a whole heap of that in bulk, and instead of spending all the time reloading, you can actually get out and shoot? So that's my thoughts on it. Thor Jensen asked here, what's your thoughts on a Marlin 3030 as the first rifle for pig hunting? Mate, probably a very good choice. The 3030 is a very underestimated cartridge. A lot of people say, oh, it's only a 100-yard gun. I just shake my head when people say that. If that's the case, go out and stand there at 200 or 300 yards and get hit by one if they're only a 100-yard gun. They have a lot of energy behind them, and they're a very, very good cartridge. A cartridge that is an old cartridge, yes, but has stood the test of time, and for good reason. Perfect for pigs. I think it would probably be one of the most popular setups for pig hunting here in Australia. Probably similar to like the Remington 7600 in 308. So it depends on what you actually want to do. Like if you're just going to be going out and shooting pigs like you're saying, fine. It'll do the job. Just out of curiosity, would the only thing I'd consider is you might even want to have a look at, say, like a lever action Marlin in 357 Magnum or 44 Magnum. Now, say for example, you're only going to be shooting pigs out from 50 to maybe 125 yards. Those cartridges are very, very good in their hunting loads coming out of a rifle. In saying that, you're going to have a lot more mag capacity because obviously they're a shorter caliber as well. Less recoil as well. If you wanted to reload it, you can, and less on cost of the ammo. So something for you to consider. However, if you're going to be just wanting to go out and shoot pigs maybe once a year, look, the 30-30 is going to do it. Brilliant caliber. Will Coleman says here, Tikka T3 or Remington 700 in 223 heavy barrel. I used to own the Tikka and loved it, but the 700 looks to have far better and cheaper aftermarket chassis and upgrades. What's your thoughts? Mate, I used to be quite a fan of Remington. I'm not now, and the only reason is I've just had bad runs with a lot of Remington stuff. For example, I bought 2 rifles there about 10 years ago. I bought a Remington 700 Police Tactical in 308. Yeah, it was the right price, and being Remington, I thought it'd be a really good rifle. It was the worst rifle I'd ever owned. The accuracy on it was ridiculous. You'd shoot a couple of shots and you'd think, okay, well, we're pretty much getting them print side by side. You fire a third shot and it'd go off by 6 inches or so. It was just terrible. Basically, I got nowhere with it, had to get rid of it, and then I had a Remington 700 Sendero in 300 Win Mag. That thing just shot brilliantly. I had no problems with it. So, look, it doesn't matter what brand of rifle you get, you can always get a lemon. So, but unfortunately, I've just seen a lot of Remingtons that have been lemons or Friday afternoon guns. In saying that, if you get one that that works, the Remington 700 action in general is just time tested. That many long distance, sniper rifles have been made off the Remington 700 action, and for good reason. It is a very good action. So, look, comparing it to Tikka, I haven't seen any Tikkas that have been lemons to the degree of what I've seen, with Remington. In saying that, though, if you get a Remington, yeah, absolutely, there's going to be a lot more upgrades for it. I mean, let's be honest, Remington's American made, so a lot of the accessories come from the States, so there's going to be a lot more upgrades for them. Now, the next question we got here, this is a final question from Nicholas Clack. He says, your thoughts on the SSAA rules of not using magazines, using their targets, and that you must have a license for a year before taking people to the range with you. Now, Nick, this is a funny one, because a lot of people think that the load and fire single rounds only, which I'm assuming you're talking about with not using a magazine, which technically you can use the mag, but not to its full capacity, just put a single round in there. That's been around even pre-96 with the SSAA. I find it very unusual that they have that, yet you can be a new shooter on their pistol range and shoot a semi-automatic pistol with a 10-round magazine, no problem at all. It's very contradictive to me. I don't know why they do it. I think it's absolutely ridiculous because you're under the supervision of a range officer anyway. So what's the difference? I mean, if someone's using, 5 rounds or 10 rounds or whatever in their magazine, I don't really see the point in having to load and fire single rounds only. There's plenty of other ranges in Australia that aren't SSAA that allow you just to load a magazine and shoot it. There's no problems there. So I don't understand that. And I do think, and I will say this, guys, I do think that some of the SSAA ranges don't have that policy where they will actually allow you to load your magazine. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't really shoot at ranges, but I do believe that there are some, so it's not across the spectrum of all SSAA ranges from my understanding, but I do think it's ridiculous that there shouldn't be any reason why you can't use a magazine. Using their targets, I mean, yeah, I remember, when I was a kid, you'd always buy a soft drink, from the clubhouse there, and you quickly scull it down because your next ceasefire you wanted to run out to 50 yards with it and shoot at it with the 22 and stuff like that. I don't know whether it could be a legal thing now. I mean, if you're shooting at targets that aren't actually theirs, do they have some legal responsibility there. I'm not sure. I'm not a lawyer. However, looking at it in basic terms, I mean, what would be the difference if you're taking out like the Hornby targets I use, for example, and putting it up at 50 yards? I mean, what's the difference with that or one of their paper ones? Well, there's one difference. The money's not going to them. It's going to someone else. Finally, okay, let's just have a look at this one again. Using their targets, and that you must have a license for a year before taking people to the range with you. Mate, that's a new one. I honestly I've never heard of that. I'm not sure what state you're from, but here in Queensland, correct me if I'm wrong once again, I didn't know that was a policy they had. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. How can you not take someone to the range with you? Let's face it, anyone can go to a range here in Queensland anyway and sign in as an unlicensed shooter, and then they're under the supervision of the range officer, so they're still on the line shooting. So what's stopping them from going in if they're unlicensed with you and then signing that form and shooting anyway? If they've got their own license, well, that's fine. They can come in by themselves if they wanted to. So, mate, I'm not too sure about that last part of your question, but I think it's absolutely ridiculous if it is true. Okay, guys, so that wraps up this month's Q&A. So, as I've said before, if you want to get into this, guys, and you want to fire some questions at me and I can answer them for you, please jump onto Patreon. You need to be able to sign up and pledge from just $1 a month. Now, guys, it helps me out. It helps me out massively. If you put some money into what I'm doing, well, I can produce more stuff, because then I'm not having to work and do extra shooting contracts to earn income. I can help substitute it with the help of you guys. All right, guys, thanks very much for becoming a part of this, and we'll see you on the next episode.